Right on. Okay, well, hello, everybody. Hello, Dr. Adriana.
Hello.
So, hi, Adriana's having a little bit of I'm going to start. I'm going to open this if it's all right with, I think the doctor has said it's okay already. But welcome, everybody, to and Ask Dr. Adriana. Um, this is a particularly interesting topic we're about to sort of embark on. This one was, so this is overcoming disempowerment. Again, Dr. Adriana is gosh, she's got a whole bunch of beautiful credentials that I'll let her reintroduce herself to you when she starts talking. But this month is Suicide Awareness Month, which is not as fluffy and sparkly of a topic as we've had in the past. And I'm really, really excited to talk to Dr. Adriana about it because she does have so many cool tools around this. And the creation of this, I'm very lucky I get to work with Adriana on her business. And so we're always we create a lot together. And so we're always sort of looking at like, what is it that people are actually asking for and where does the business want to go, what's out there, what's like required. And so disempowerment is obviously a pretty vast topic, and I think we have a lot to go on. And to be completely vulnerable with this conversation is typically with the Ask Adriana topics, we have anywhere from like 5 to 12 questions that we dwindle out of probably about 10 to 20. So we come into these conversations with like 5 really solid questions that we've kind of put together over the month of people submitting their questions. And this one actually had 0. So, which sort of put me in a place of like, oh gosh, like what is this then? And I'd say like disempowerment, suicide awareness, these are topics that to me are like a little bit of a slow moving, like slippery slope. Adriana can speak to this in a huge way because of the work that she does every day. So I've got some questions to ask actually from the doctor, and I'll just kind of give the microphone over to Dr. Adriana just so that she can introduce herself a bit and start this conversation off.
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Adriana Popescu. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, an addiction and trauma specialist, and an empowerment coach based out of San Francisco, California. So yes, questions around life and death and the disempowerment that can lead to certain circumstances with life and, with death in particular. Is definitely a specialty of mine, working with people who are depressed, feeling hopeless, who are suicidal or who have committed suicide, and working with the families and loved ones of people who have chosen that, working with people with chronic illness, which, or drug addiction, which to me are kind of like the slower paths to potentially ending your life. I mean, it just shows up in so many different ways. And I think the times we're living in right now, exactly. I, as well as many of the people I know personally and the clients I'm working with, are so sensitive and aware to how many people are exiting the planet right now in various ways, and how much there is this sense of overwhelm, like, what is the point of it all? It's a kind of an existential, really, time for people. So I think it's very apropos that it's, suicide awareness month. In some cases, it's called suicide prevention as well. And so I think what we're trying to do here is just raise more consciousness around the topic. And really, my point always in everything I'm doing is to empower people, to empower people to know that they have choice, and that maybe there are more choices available than just the one they see in front of them. I'm either going to live or I'm going to die, or whatever it is. People tend to go to either or black or white thinking. And my greatest joy is to let people know there's more available.
I really love, just to jump in here, I love the particular use of like consciousness there. Because there isn't a right or wrong with it. Like, just to note, like Adriana's, I think exact words were raising consciousness around the topic and letting people know that they have choice. Meaning this is an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but that's a choice too. And how many, yeah, okay, cool. So can I just do you mind if I just jump in and start sort of asking some stuff? So then you touched on a whole bunch of things just even in your intro. So the slow versions of like suicide, I guess let's talk about disempowerment and empowerment versus that sort of, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess suicide would probably be a symptom of pretty acute disempowerment, as among other things, correct? Okay, cool. So
or
then,
maybe I should even say how. I'm not sure everyone actually would connect those dots. Maybe I should say a little bit about that. Yeah.
Please.
Like, what do I even mean by disempowerment, right? Some people don't even know kind of what that term is referring to. When I am using the term disempowerment, I mean disconnected from your self, really, your fundamental, like essential self, disconnected from that and feeling like being in a space of powerlessness, hopelessness usually comes with it, and helplessness. And it's almost as if, they used to do these terrible experiments with dogs, but I often talk about it because I think it illustrates a really good point. In your psychology classes in college, you learn about this experiment they did with dogs before they had like humane laws passed around animal experimentation, where they really would, they would shock the dogs. They would put them in a cage, and the cage had an electric bottom, and they would shock the dogs with an electric shock. And not enough to like kill them, but enough to make them uncomfortable. And the dogs initially would start barking, and they'd be jumping up and down, and they'd be trying to get away from the shocks. And eventually over time, what they did was they would just give up, and they would just lay there passively, in the cage while they keep getting shocked over and over again. And to me, as graphic as that sounds, I think that's how disempowerment feels. It's like you come here to this reality. It's not an easy place to be. There is a ton of challenge and struggle with even just having a body and being on this planet, I think particularly at this time. And you just keep getting shocked. I mean, I work with people with trauma, right? But all of us, even with like the little T traumas, the day-to-day traumas, it isn't just like have to be a big T trauma, like an assault, a natural disaster, something like that. Day to day, it's like we're all getting those shocks over and over and over again. And so are you going to rise to the occasion and like try to get out? Some of the dogs would like scramble and try to find a way out, or bark or resist in some kind of way, to change it, to try to change their situation? Or do you end up in a position where you're laying on the ground, just letting the shocks happen to you, giving up on ever coming out of it? Learned helplessness is what they call that.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. And so then overcoming disempowerment, once you're already there, because I think that's sort of what I was alluding to or wanting to get into, is like, it's a slow process often. And so that's just sort of one of the things I came to with like, gosh, why isn't there any questions? Well, because people, I think, that are slowly becoming more and more disempowered or disempowering themselves or whatever, it's sort of like, you just almost like it's so not sudden that often. Or, I mean, is it like, is that true? Or like, what is in your experience? Like, what does this process look like? I'm looking at like in my personal life, people that I know that are like, depressed, or they like a bit of a hit comes, which you call it a shock. I actually like that analogy, but as graphic as it is, it's pretty true. They get a shock, and then they maybe get another one. And some people, it sort of seems to be like, it like strengthens them, or they use it for fuel. And then sometimes they don't, but for the most part, it's like, ouch, gloves off, try harder. Another ouch, another setback. And then they move past it or move through it in a particular way. And then I'm watching other people in my life just slowly get shocked and shocked and shocked until they're the dog lying on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so I guess if you can speak to like what the difference is there, and like, is there like a one type of person or a different type of person? Are you seeing this in, please feel free to jump in and save me from my own talking.
No. I think you bring up a really good question. What we call it in psychobabble is resilience. Like, how resilient are you to stressful events? And it varies. I would say it's on a spectrum. Some people, like, we could all experience the same thing, like, let's say a natural disaster, a flood, fire, here in California, we have fires. Well, all of us could experience that. And some of us will like pick up afterwards and maybe of course everyone's going to experience some sort of traumatic effect, but some people will be able to rise up from that and use it as a way to strengthen themselves. Like, I learned so much about myself from this. I realized like material things don't matter. We lost everything, but what really matters is my relationships. And I have a whole new lease on life. Like, a lot of times people who survive cancer or some other kind of illness will say that as well. Like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because, now I'm making different choices and I'm prioritizing my life differently. Things like that. We call that like post-traumatic growth, when you're able to survive a painful event and actually grow from it. And then there are people on this, I would say on the other end of the spectrum, who maybe have had repeated traumas, complex traumas. Usually the worst cases I see are the ones that start in childhood. Because the thing is, when you're a child and you experience abuse, neglect, or just a super chaotic home where there's violence and any of those kinds of situations, there's addiction, there's mental health issues in your home, you don't grow up with, a lot of kids don't grow up with a belief in themselves that they are strong enough to survive that. They either take on the beliefs of their caregivers, who may themselves be, I hate to use the term victims, but that's what we call it in terminology, trauma victims themselves, who have unprocessed trauma, and it's like oozing out all over the family, right? You have that situation. You have intergenerational trauma that gets passed down. You got your ancestral trauma. And so people are acting these things out, and little children, when they're exposed to that, or they're the targets of that, they can come to believe about themselves that I am fundamentally bad or wrong, because children don't understand adult things. They don't understand mom or dad has mental health issues. They don't understand this was done to them and they just don't know how else to be. They think if something bad is happening to me, it's my fault. I have done something, not even that I've done something wrong. I am wrong. I am bad. I am wrong. And these core beliefs that my colleague, TJ Woodward, loves to call in his work, core false beliefs. We develop these core false beliefs about ourselves. And it can be things like, I'm a victim, I'm powerless, I can't control the things that happen to me, I can't trust myself to be able to get out of things. And so when you have a belief system like that and it's operating in your subconscious, then you're constantly going to attract people, places, and things that are going to shock you. You're going to keep inviting those electric shocks over and over again. And it's not going to be conscious, typically, because of your worldview, because it's almost like you've given your power away to those external events. And so you don't even recognize that you might be co-creating that in an unconscious way, that you are inviting abusive people into your life, that you have maybe patterns of abuse, self-abuse, drugs, alcohol, self-harm, whatever, but that is coming from a disempowered place. It's coming from, I don't believe that I fundamentally have within me what it takes to survive or to thrive. So it always comes back to your core beliefs.
Okay, and resilience, to like sort of paraphrase, resilience is part of a core belief.
Resilience is your ability to bounce back. Let's put it in lay terms. Resilience is your ability to bounce back when life knocks you down.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that opens things up, because it's almost like stages of disempowerment and like getting over that. Mm-hmm. Overcoming the stages of disempowerment, because there are some that are just straight up like abuse. It's a totally different topic then. Okay, cool. So, okay, awesome. So then choices and realizing, so let's like kind of wind back a little bit into like this sort of slow, like almost like I'm getting like the frog in water thing, when you're like slowly and then you just like hit a breaking point. I guess, like, what are some signs almost that one can look at for themselves that they're like headed in the direction of not even suicide, but like they're headed in a direction that they won't be able to, that will be harder to like get out of? Like, back to my like people that I'm talking about in my personal life, like the depressed, the slowly worse and worse and worse. Like it's like the disempowerment is almost like growing. And what can people either that know you do, or what can you do for yourself to sort of like watch for when it's not just another ouch, I'll get back up again thing. And it's a little bit more long-term. Like it's something that you actually need to be like, quote unquote, concerned about.
Right. So I would say some of the red flags would be, yeah, signs of depression, which takes physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. It has those components. So physically, you might feel more exhausted. Like there's a very strong level of like burnout, exhaustion. Maybe it can go either way, like sleeping more than usual or wanting to sleep all the time. Not having the energy to do the things that normally make you feel good, like exercise or eating in a healthier way. It can also go the other way with sleep, where if you're super head trippy, you're ruminating on things, you're obsessing and ruminating, usually on very negative thoughts, very self-critical thoughts, and then maybe you can't sleep, and then you've got insomnia, right? You could have weight gain because you find yourself maybe self-soothing with food, and because you're more lethargic, maybe you're not burning as many calories, but you could also be not eating and losing weight. You've lost interest in food. Those are some of the physical signs. Brain fog also can be part of that. Mentally, negative thoughts like, what is the point of it all? Why even bother? Nobody cares anyways. The world's going to hell, and let's face it, it feels kind of apocalyptic at the moment. So negative thoughts, ruminating thoughts, kind of obsessive thoughts, fantasies of, starting to think about what would it be like if I wasn't here anymore. People will start typically engaging, a lot of, obviously the clients I see may relapse after a period of sobriety, or find that their substance use has increased, which in COVID times, that's like a known statistic. Tons of people have started drinking more, smoking weed, eating more food, whatever. So addictive kind of behaviors as a way to try to numb or escape the feelings. Emotionally, you might feel sad, you might feel desperate, you might start feeling really hopeless. Like you start losing, and this goes into the spiritual, you start losing that connection with yourself, like that happy, joyful being that you fundamentally are, that you were when you were very young. And you maybe even lose hope for the future, and you might lose a sense of meaning and purpose, and you disconnect from other people. I mean, typically isolation, you start isolating from others, you don't return calls, people might be worried about you, you don't feel like you don't show up, you do the bare minimum. I mean, that's sort of the progressive decline, and you start to feel disconnected from the universe, God, higher power, whatever that is for you. Oftentimes you'll question if there even is such a thing, because how could, God allow this to happen? Things like that. Those are the kinds of experiences people typically are having, that I would call the warning signs that you're slipping into that disempowered, depressed, potentially suicidal place.
Okay, thank you. And then what I love about you, one of the many things that I love about you is you have a lot of tools in your tool belt. Like you come from you studied this, you have a lot of different sort of vantage points and tools to kind of look at this from the other side. And so when people are finding themselves there, what is the overcoming side of the disempowerment? So can you shed like some of the tools you use with your clients, like once that kind of, if you wouldn't mind, almost like all over the place, like if you're just starting to find yourself be this way, if you're already here. And then we have actually had a couple questions come through since you've been speaking. So do you want to start talking about a few tools, and then
Sure.
I'll start collecting these questions?
Well, I think I would actually go back to the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual and talk about tools in that way. And then some common tool threads that go through all of them. So this might be lengthy. Physically, I think you need to look at how you're taking care of yourself. Your really basic, like food, sleep, hydration, things like that. And look at what be honest with yourself and look at what you're doing. Are you drinking too much? What effect is that having? Alcohol in the short term, yeah, it can make you feel good for a little while, and it gives you a little bit of a reprieve, but overall it's a depressant, as is weed, as are a lot of substances. For as high up as you come up, you end up falling down below where you were when you started. So it's a vicious cycle of that further tends to enhance depression. So really looking at your use of substances, how you're eating, what effect that's having on you. Look, there are antidepressants, and for a number of people, they can work. They can help, particularly, I would say, when it's getting severe to the point of you can't get out of bed and you can't do things, or you're having those suicidal thoughts. I would say at that point, it's time to maybe talk with a doctor and just see if medication might be something that could help you, because it has a tendency, if you get on the right meds, and it's a little bit of experimentation sometimes to figure out what works. But if you can get on the right meds, it actually will give you enough of a boost to get you out of bed and moving and able to use other tools. So when it's really bad, medication has its place. Or these days, there's some really interesting treatments. The psychedelic assisted therapies have really grown, and something like ketamine assisted, or ketamine's the legal one right now. Ketamine assisted therapy has been really shown to be really effective for treatment resistant depression that hasn't responded to meds. There are also studies going on with MDMA and psilocybin and a number of other psychedelic, and even nitrous oxide now, interestingly enough, where they're finding that these medications can work with depression. And there are trials going on right now across the country, really around the world, with these different medications. So that might be something to look at. So that's kind of on the physical plane. And there's even like other kinds of antidepressant treatments, like trans TMS with magnets. They put magnets on your head and it starts changing the way your brain is functioning. Some of the therapies I really like to use, especially when there's a lot of stuff in the body, are somatic-based therapies. I'll talk more about energy psychology, but there's things like somatic experiencing that are really helpful for people who have like a lot of the heavy energy that's stuck in their body, or trauma stuck in their bodies that's contributing. Mental, emotional. I think mentally you need to look at the thoughts you're having. I mean, you've got to look at what are your thought patterns and where are they coming from? And here's where like the tool of who does it belong to from Access Consciousness can be really useful, because most of us, at least the people I work with, are highly sensitive, empathic people. And they're picking up on the thoughts and feelings, even the physical sensations of people all around them. And not even just people like locally, because now what we know about the way energy is from quantum physics is like you could be thinking about someone like halfway around the world and tuning into what they're thinking and feeling. So if you are having these more negative thoughts, even thoughts of hurting yourself, you might want to ask, who does this belong to? You might be picking up on somebody else's stuff. Like I wake up in the morning, I live in San Francisco, there's people all around. I wake up in the morning and before I've even opened my eyes, I can hear in my head, ugh, I don't want to be here. I hate everyone. I hate being here. And I know that's not mine. I'm actually pretty aware of who in my building and nearby that might actually belong to. There's some really depressed people around here. So what if what you're thinking and feeling, so the emotions of sadness and frustration and whatever, might not even be yours, or might be something you're picking up from a loved one, or your physical environment, or again, you know, someone who's far away, but you're emotionally connected with them, you might be picking up on their stuff. So in that case, I always say, you know, the tool to do is, who does this belong to? And send back what's not yours. And if you're not really clear, usually you'll get an intuitive hit. It'll feel kind of like, oh, that's not mine. Or if you ask, you know, there's a tool called Light and Heavy, or we have muscle testing that we can also use to kind of check the energy. These are energy checks that will give you more clarity around that. But even if you don't know, like light or heavy, try sending the energy back and see if it even improves a slight little bit. And then you know that energy wasn't yours. This is really important right now, given the intensity of what goes on in the world. I mean, the minute I turn on the news, like, or read the news, it's like immediately I'm there. Like if I'm reading about Afghanistan, it's like anxiety and terror and panic and all those things. And it taps into you can call it collective unconscious, you can call it your personal history, but we've all had traumatic events, whether in our lives, in this lifetime, in another lifetime, or in our ancestry, in our family. All of us have gone through war. violence, pestilence, plagues, illness, torture, all these horrific things. And what I'm seeing right now, there's a huge activation of that. And it's been going on for a few years now. Everything from like Me Too to Black Lives Matter. It's like all the centuries and millennia of human suffering have, like, that's been under the surface the whole time, is like rising up again, to use a graphic description, kind of like an infected wound that, you know, had like, and the pus is all coming out. And that's part of what needs to happen for humanity to heal. And we're in that time right now. So there's that. So mentally, emotionally, who does it belong to? And then looking at those subconscious beliefs, right? So like, how are you seeing yourself? What is the lens through which you're seeing yourself in the world? Is it distorted? In cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk about thought distortions. You know, do you tend to catastrophize things? Do you tend to see everything in black or white terms? Do you tend to minimize the positive aspects of yourself and maximize the negative? Things like that. So challenging those ways of thinking. Well, what proof do you have that that's true? What if it's not true? Asking questions is another really valuable tool. You know, is this actually true? How do I know it's true? What's another way to look at it? What other choices do I have? One of my favorites, what's right about me I'm not getting? What's right about all this that's going on that I'm not getting? Asking questions to change the way that you're thinking, because then that's going to affect the way you feel. I mean, the thoughts come before the feelings always, consciously or not. And so then if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling hopeless, what is the thought that I'm having that's creating this? Is it even mine? Where is it coming from? And what other way is there to see it? Which then I think goes into spiritual. And spiritual is kind of a broad topic, but it's like, what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Is it connection? You know, most people, it's when just being around loved ones or being around your furry one. You know, pets are incredibly healing, and look at how many people have gotten pets during COVID, you know? So nature, outdoors, water, anything that connects, meditation, prayer. For me, I've gotten a lot of support from my spirit friends, you know, people, loved ones who have passed, or my teammates. Some people call them their spirit guides. I like to call them teammates. They've really been super supportive. And, you know, in this time when it's been really difficult, they've been giving me kind words and encouragement, and they contribute to me energetically. And I'll add a piece around who does it belong to. So, you know, there's spirits out there that are kind and loving and light and love and all that. And then there are beings roaming around, especially earthbound spirits, that are not so positive, that are actually don't have your best interest at heart, or are people who, let's say, are traumatized themselves, people who were once in bodies, who left their bodies, and they didn't just walk into the light. They're still carrying around their traumas. Some of them are confused. Some of them still have that energy of drugs and alcohol. They're discombobulated. They're angry. They're whatever. And they're around too. And they tend to be attracted to that energy. And what I've seen in my work with the talk to the entities stuff that I do is that sometimes when people are suicidal or having these really dark thoughts, it's not even anyone else in a body. They're picking up on those beings who maybe did commit suicide, or who still are carrying around their burdens, and they're aware of it, and they're drawn to that energy. So, right, just like drug entities, as we say, are attracted to people who are using drugs and alcohol, right? Because that's a familiar vibration to them. And so you might be attracting those kinds of spirits towards you, who might be encouraging you to, like, yeah, go ahead and do it. Just do it. Kill yourself, you know, or just jump off that thing. I can't tell you how many clients. And if you hear it in that way, you should go have a drink. You should go get high. It's probably not you. Most of us don't talk to us in the second person. You would say, I should go have a drink. Maybe I should jump off that bridge. If it's coming as you, that might be a clue that it's not coming from you, and you're picking it up from someone else, something else, someone or something else. So I know that was a lot.
That was wicked. Thank you. I was really hoping, or like wondering if you would touch on some of the talk to the entity stuff, because it's a little, I mean, it's out there, but you have enough experience to know it's not as out there as it seems like it's out there, you know? We do now have a question in, so I'm going to read it to you. Okay, so I'm noticing that the place where I find the most disempowerment is actually in the workplace. I can't seem to set proper boundaries and limits to others. Sorry, I can't seem to set proper boundaries or limitations for others, coworkers, and clients. Do you have any tools or advice for this? How can I overcome this?
Well, I don't know if this is exactly how you're thinking, but the first thing that pops up is if you're expecting that you can do something to make them be different, forget about it. Okay. We can't change anybody else. Sometimes people are misguided about setting boundaries. They think, I'm going to say or do this. I'm going to set this boundary so that they don't keep doing what they're doing, which feels really intrusive to me. I don't find that that's super effective. A better way to set a boundary would be with yourself, to say, I'm not going to let whatever they're doing affect me. They're going to be crazy and they're going to be mean and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Right? This is a step towards allowance, right? I'm not going to resist and react to that, because when I do that, I put them on a pedestal and I actually give them power over me. So I'm going to take my power back. They can keep doing whatever they're going to do. And I'm going to stay strong and grounded in my space and not let their stuff get to me. So this could be something where, like, the tool of interesting point of view. Well, interesting point of view. They have that point of view. You know, like I got some interesting feedback the other day at work about my general personality. And I'm like, well, it's an interesting point of view that they have that point of view. And I can look at my side of the street and look at, is there a way in which maybe I could, you know, shift to this? Or is that a fundamental trait of who I am? And I'm not going to bend, fold, staple, and mutilate myself to accommodate somebody else's discomfort, right? So it's like, I had to ask myself questions about what's actually true here, and whose stuff is this? So I guess, and I would also look at, where are these people functioning from? Usually people that are bullies, usually people that are mean, critical, judgmental, whatever. It's because they feel like crap about themselves and they're projecting that out onto others. And so you might be the convenient target of someone else's own stuff that they're putting on you. Don't take it personally, right? Use your tools to not take it personally. You can send back to them their barbs or their whatever they're doing, send it back to them. You can be interesting point of view with it. You can ask, okay, how can I outcreate this? How can I outcreate these people? What would it take for all of this to turn out greater than I could ever imagine? Asking questions, right? What other options or choices do I have here? And maybe you do need to take action. Maybe you need to go to your boss or HR and say something. You know, that might be an appropriate thing as well. But typically, I don't find it very useful to try to get other people to change. It's more like, how can I change my reaction to? Where my control lies is in how I respond and react to what they're doing. And what other choices do I have in terms of how I respond? What would be more empowering to me?
Awesome, thanks. And then there's actually one more question that you've sort of touched on, and I'm not sure if it fits here, but so what is abuse in all of this? I seem to be inviting abuse, or am I inviting disempowerment and abuse is happening? Am I like, or is this, sorry, what is abuse in all of this? Am I inviting disempowerment or abuse, or is that happening to me?
Well, that's the problem. If you have a point of view that these things are happening to me, then yes, you would be attracting that. If you have a victim consciousness, which is the point of view that I am powerless over the things that happen to me, then you're likely to unconsciously, through law of attraction, be attracting that. I'm reminded of a really astute client I once had years ago who had just horrific, like, violence and abuse in her childhood. I mean, really, really bad. And she was conscious of that predator prey energy. She said, like, she could be in a grocery store and she would zoom in on the one man. She had a history of abusive relationships. She would just zoom in energetically on him, that one abusive man, and he would zoom in on her. It was like this magnetic pull that she was super conscious of, because she was functioning from that abuse mentality where she was almost projecting that energy out and, like, radiating that energy so that the predators could find them. And I think that's why you see the patterns happening over and over again, right? It's like, and this is not about making you wrong by any means. It's about looking at taking your power back by looking at your side of the street. What might I be putting out there that's attracting this, right? What if you're not a victim where things happen to you, What if in some way you are co-creating these abusive dynamics? And what point of view do you have that is creating that? Maybe you have a point of view like, I don't deserve better than this. I'm a bad person. I'm not enough. No one loves me. I'm worthless. If you believe those things to be true, then of course you're going to attract people, places, and things to mirror back to you the truth of your beliefs, because that's what we do. Psychologically, we're wired for confirmation bias. We're always looking for the evidence to confirm that our points of view are actually true. I actually write about this. A lot of what we're talking about is actually, just to give a little like preview of what's to come. I write about a lot of this in my book that's coming out, hopefully this fall, called What If You're Not as Fucked Up as You Think You Are? Because this is really how it works, is that what we think, your point of view creates your reality. And so if you believe you are disempowered, you're a victim, you're all of that, that will be the reality you create. If you want to create a different reality, you might need to change that point of view.
Cool. Wow. That's almost like the fundamental of the fundamental of the fundamental of all of this is like, what are you functioning from that's allowing this to exist?
Yes.
All of it, everywhere. Because like what did you call it when you said we're always looking for a confirmational, what?
Confirmation bias. So we disregard all the other evidence that doesn't fit our point of view. We're looking for confirmation that what we believe to be true is. So if you believe the world is a horrible place, you're always going to be scouring the environment for the evidence to prove that the world is a horrible place.
And that's where that downward spiral into something like suicide can be so easy to like quote unquote fall into, because it's all you see, it's all you want to see, it's all you see, it's all you want to see, and then that's just where you like
and you can find plenty of evidence out there to support those beliefs, unfortunately.
Right. Okay, cool. Wow. All right. Well, I guess maybe, I mean, you went over some great tools. We did have a couple of questions. Those have been answered already. I mean, Dr. Adriana, is there anything else that you want to share with anybody around like all of this? Suicide awareness, maybe how to look out for it in people that you care about, how to like one of the things I know that like if you do have people in your life that you're like wondering if they're like suicide prone, or if they're headed that direction, or if they're just like really just whatever it is like how do you like lend a hand and invite somebody to something else if they want it, if they don't want it, like how do you help basically?
Yeah, don't be pushy. Don't try to like push someone into something. Ask a question, like let them know, hey, I really care about you. I'm a little concerned about you. Is there anything I can do to contribute? Can you let me know what would be the most helpful to you? Do you just want some space? Do you want to be left alone? Can I come over and give you a hug? Can I virtually hug you over Zoom or something? Can I send you some food? Can we go for a walk? Sometimes just movement, I have to say, when you're in that stuck lethargic place, like just changing your environment, going outside for, even if it's a walk around the block, can be super helpful. So maybe inviting your loved one or the person you care about for a walk. Can we go for a walk? Can we just because a lot of times the depressed person doesn't want to talk about it. So don't try to make them, but maybe distract them. Can we watch this funny movie? Or I love like David Attenborough. I love like the nature documentaries. I just find them so inspiring. And if you have BBC America all day long on Saturdays, every Saturday for I think 24 hours, all they show is episode after episode of David Attenborough and all the series that he's done. So it's like nature and this amazing planet all day. I find that really inspirational. Inviting them to watch a movie with you, share a meal, those kinds of really basic things. Can I help you with like something around your house? Can I help you do your laundry or clean your house for you? Acts of kindness, acts of service sometimes can be super powerful, because the depressed person is thinking nobody cares about me, nobody loves me. So I wouldn't necessarily totally leave them alone. Again, unless they're just absolutely no, then okay. But just let them know at least you care and that you're there and available for when they do, when they would like to talk with you. If you're really concerned, some people don't know this, if you're really concerned about somebody that they actually might harm themselves, you can call the police, or you can call like your not 911, but the non-emergency number. And police can actually do a welfare check. If you have mental health crisis also in your community, they can do it. And they'll do a welfare check. They'll go there to the person's house, knock on the door, and assess them for suicidality. And if they are in fact actively suicidal, they can 5150 them, which means, taking them to a psych hospital where they can get some treatment. So that is an option if you're really worried, about your life. You haven't heard from them in a while, something like that. You can always call police to get a welfare check, at least in the US and probably in Canada as well. So that's what I would say for the loved ones. And then you asked me another question. I forget what. Not final thoughts, but like thoughts I have about all this. Maybe there was something I wanted to say. Sometimes I give people the analogy of a storm. Like when a storm comes, like you can't stop the storm from coming. It's coming. All you can do is kind of batten down the hatches. Like you might need to like put some sandbags up, or I don't know, board up your windows or whatever, hunker down, get your supplies, and just ride it out. That sometimes you just have to do that. And I think we're in a time right now with this COVID and crazy and everything where we just need to ride it out. And it may not be a time when you're experiencing a lot of joy or pleasure, but can you take small pleasures, little things, again, like snuggling with your kitty, watching a funny movie, eating a good meal. Take pleasure in those small things and just remember that this too shall pass. This storm shall pass. Okay. The thing about energy is it's not fixed. I mean, energy is really the common thread in all of this. Energy, your thoughts, your emotions, everything is energy, right? And energy is always in motion and it never stays fixed. It feels like you can feel stuck, but in reality, nothing ever stays the same. Like I was saying to somebody yesterday, they wouldn't allow themselves to cry. Cry is such a wonderful release. People are afraid to cry because they think, oh my God, if I let loose, I'll never stop crying. I have yet to see someone who has never stopped crying. Eventually you stop crying. Eventually you release it all and there's nothing left, So, so just to remind people that this too shall pass. It feels really bad right now, but it won't always feel this bad. And it hasn't probably always felt this bad.
I think
and,
that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think it just seeks support. I mean, there's professional support out there, if you're really feeling direly, in a dire space, then there's all kinds, there's suicide hotlines. We should put that in the show notes.
There's add that too. There's going to be all the links and all this stuff for everybody, because you mentioned a lot of resources, and I think that's one of the reasons we're talking to you today is for the resources you're aware of. Sorry, Adriana, go on. I have something to add when you're done.
Yeah, I mean, there's suicide prevention hotlines, and there's support groups, and there's so much free stuff out there, and there's NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. If you have a diagnosed depression, or you are the loved one of somebody who does, there are support groups similar to AA, free, all over the place, online. These days, everything is accessible online, which is great. There's a ton of resources out there, and you are not alone. I mean, that's the name of the campaign. Access Consciousness right now is doing a month-long campaign in honor of Suicide Awareness Month called You Are Not Alone. That's the biggest thing I think for people to remember is you aren't alone. I know you may feel that way sometimes, but you're never really alone. And, connection is just a phone call or website away. There are going to be people with that You're Not Alone campaign, people around the world who are offering access bars, which is a really wonderful hands-on form of energy work that can release some of those negative thoughts, emotions, traumas, things like that. There's other kinds of energy work, Reiki, some people find super helpful. Theta healings, I mean, there's 1,001 modalities. Tapping, I'm a big fan of tapping. I definitely would recommend people look into that. EFT, emotional freedom techniques. There's videos on YouTube about it. There's all kinds of energy psychology resources that you can find at energypsych.org. I mean, there's 1,001 resources out there. I guess for people to know you have choice in all of this and you can change the way you feel. The resources are there.
Love that. And I know that that would probably be a beautiful place to end on. And I just have to add one thing, which is like this weird little subset of people that you would never think go into like suicide or disempowerment are actually those like super confident business owners, creative types, people that like actually are used to super, super high functioning stuff, high functioning,
Yeah.
overachieving things, like they're killing it all the time. And right now, with what's gone on with COVID and their businesses are hurting, or they're just not as creative, is that this too shall pass is the best advice I've heard ever. Because it's like, even for me and my team, it's like one of us has one day when we're not like shooting for the moon and like killing it at everything and like, creating tons of business and new websites, and like the moment we have like a day where it's just sort of like on here rather than here, everyone goes into this like wah wah wah, rather than maybe it's time for a nice dinner, maybe
Yeah.
it's time for a walk. Like it's like those days where that's just like okay, because
Yeah.
anyways, I needed to add that in because that was like sort of a personal thank you for me and my business. But
Well, no, and I
yeah.
think it's very apropos. Your body will tell you. Like yesterday, I don't usually need a nap, but like I needed a nap. At 6 o'clock in the evening, which is a weird time, but I was exhausted from everything. That's when like you might be overdoing it. I mean, a lot of those driven people tend to be very perfectionist and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They tend to be your more anxious types. So they'll have like a depression that's like an agitated, anxious kind of depression. But to not force yourself, and it's okay, especially with creativity, it ebbs and flows. It's okay to go in a cocoon for a while. A lot of us are kind of in a cocoon or in a cave right now. That's actually a healthy thing. The bear goes into the cave for the winter to hibernate, and a a caterpillar goes into a cocoon to transform. It's like that is a necessary part of their life cycle. What if you too sometimes have to go in your cave or go in your cocoon, and that something greater will emerge, at the correct time.
Shoot, I was muted. Wow, thanks, Adriana. That was really beautiful. Really beautiful. Holy crap, guys. We have a lot in this hour. This is usually obviously everybody that is in the Facebook group to see this is the person seeing this. We're actually going to make sure that there's little pieces of this available for the whole world, just because this is so the time to be addressing some of this stuff. Dr. Adriana, thank you so much. Thank you for the tools. Thank you for all the awareness. Thank you for like your scope of like actually your like spectrum of knowing all across the board of like all the different like stages of all of this stuff and kind of where to go with it all. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody that did submit those questions at the end there. And for whoever watches this and wants to know more, we'll make sure it's really easy for you to find Dr. Adriana and also all the resources that she mentioned. All right, Adriana, anything else you wanted to say? I think other than a hug goodbye to everybody that watches us today.
Virtual hugs to everybody. Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. And remember, yeah, you're not alone, and this too shall pass. And what else is possible? When in doubt, ask what else is possible here. What else is possible I've never even considered.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you again. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Ed. Bye.